I think in Africa, AIDS is the closest equivalent we have of warfare, because you're knocking out your young adult population.
Les Américains disent, bon, c'est l'Afrique, les Africains disent, c'est les Blancs. Nous, on dit, c'est les Muzungu qui ont amené le sida.
In Africa now, if a girl told you to use a condom, then I think the whole thing is stop. The whole thing actually stops on the spot.
Countries like Zaire, Rwanda, Burundi, Uganda, one is already in a full-fledged epidemic, and the infection rates may be up to 20% of the adult population.
Do you have children?
Yes, I have. And that's why I'm trying my best to live, because once I die, the father has died. Who will look after those children? They are still in school. They need assistance. They need school fees, they need feeding and clothing. And that's why we are trying our best to counsel people to try to live positively so that they can look after their families, at least for some years.
The International Conference on AIDS. 11,000 delegates from all over the world attend the largest gathering on this crisis. Since 1980, between 5 and 10 million have been infected with HIV, the AIDS-causing virus.
We were able to adopt a randomized sample.
Although AIDS is not deeply entrenched in all of Africa, in Central Africa it has reached epidemic proportions and is spreading 4 times faster than anywhere else on Earth. For all those concerned with this crisis, Africa is high on the international agenda.
Are we losing the battle in Africa?
No, I don't think that's going to happen. I think that what has got to happen is a kind of societal responsibility. The global tribe pulling together on this.
This may be a losing battle, but until we have lost it, we should not give up. Because if we give up, then for sure it is lost.
In Africa, there is currently the largest gap between the seriousness of the problem and the extent of the resources available to deal with the problem. And I think it's up to the international community to also be sure that they do not abandon Africa, that they do not marginalize Africa, that they do not feel at any time that Africa's problem is not also their problem when we talk about AIDS.
In the Western imagination, the word evokes romantic images, but the real Africa is very different. Deserts are expanding. The legendary rainforests and savannas are shrinking, succumbing to the pressure of human population growth. The resilient spirit of Africa is struggling with underdevelopment aggravated by mass migration from country to city, civil strife, and corruption. Into this continent of contrasts and extremes has come a new enemy. Quietly, It infiltrated the cities. Unnoticed at first, AIDS has now made itself known. By the year 2000, it is estimated that the disease will have killed several million Africans. But since there can be a time lag of up to 10 years from the moment of HIV infection to the onset of full-blown AIDS, the virus is spreading while other problems take priority.
Is AIDS the biggest health problem in Malawi?
No, the health problem number one in Malawi is malaria. That is problem number one. And AIDS is nowhere near that. But I look at AIDS as a fire in the bush, and it's not the numbers. Because if we are not careful, it can spread faster than maybe even malaria.
It seems in the African setting that it is almost equally easy for a man as for a woman to catch the disease. So that's why you get the 40-40 relationship. The 20% are mostly children born to infected mothers.
Il y a une grande différence avec ce qui se passe aux États-Unis et en Europe, c'est que dans ces contextes occidentaux, on trouve presque 90% de malades sida sont soit homosexuels, toxicomanes ou hémophiles. Tandis que dans nos pays, nous ne pouvons pas pointer du doigt, si vous voulez, un groupe spécifique de la population.
La transmission s'est faite de l'homme à la femme et de la femme à l'homme. Alors, nous nous sommes demandé quel est le lien entre les hétérosexuels ici et les homosexuels. Où est le point commun? Je pense qu'il n'y a qu'un seul point commun. Le point commun entre tous ces patients africains, américains, européens, c'est le fait que tous ces malades ont beaucoup de partenaires sexuels. Le point commun, si vous voulez, c'est l'anarchie sexuelle.
I think it scares everybody. It doesn't scare you.
Are you married?
I'm both married.
The new Africa, urban, cosmopolitan, fast-paced, bursting at the seams. This is Abidjan in the French-speaking Ivory Coast, West Africa. But it could be Nairobi or Kinshasa or any one of a dozen modern African cities. Saturday night, a familiar scene in cities around the world. African cities like Abidjan are magnets for the young. They stream in from the outlying rural areas and from neighboring countries, looking for a better life. They leave behind the traditional life in which they grew up. And in the vacuum created by the loss of community traditions, sexual promiscuity is rampant. Cities are a feeding ground for the ravenous appetite of AIDS. Canfor came to Abidjan looking for work. She became a prostitute.
Je suis au Ghana, et puis Mansell, elle est venue blaguer que, allons à Abidjan, Ivory Coast, on va aller travailler. J'ai le blanc, on travaillait avec blanc, et puis à la fin, elle dit bon, si tu veux, parce qu'elle a amené l'argent avec bagage, quoi. Donc, ça me plaît. Puis je dis que bon, alors, on va aller travailler aussi. Quand on arrive à Abidjan ici, c'est pas bon travail qui m'a amené là. Puis moi, j'ai fâché avec lui qui m'a blagué, il m'a amené ça. Il dit qu'il ne fait pas, il est resté à la maison un mois. Elle dit qu'il ne donne pas manger. Puis moi aussi, je ne connais pas quelqu'un ici. Puis il a commencé à faire des conneries jusqu'à ça fait 5 mois.
Quelle connerie?
Jesus, puis on baisse bien.
T'as pas peur?
J'ai peur.
T'as peur?
J'ai peur.
De quoi t'as peur?
Oui, maladie là.
Quelle maladie?
On dit sida.
there are many arrangements that exist because of socioeconomic pressures that are just as important in the transmission. For example, if a young university student, female student, is in a country where there are no scholarships, and she comes from a poor family, she needs to find a way of surviving, which usually means that she will accept an ongoing relationship with at least one older, successful male.
Lorsque vous considérez les femmes qui font le sida, la plupart de ces femmes sont des femmes non mariées, des célibataires, des veuves, des divorcées. Pourquoi? C'est parce que ce sont des jeunes femmes qui n'ont pas de moyens, autrement dit des femmes pauvres, qui font le commerce sexuel et qui attrapent la maladie par ce moyen. Et donc ces femmes-là sont des femmes pauvres.
Highways are the lifeblood of African trade, connecting remote communities with the outside world. Truckers, virtually the only long-distance drivers in Africa, contribute to the spread of AIDS across the continent. But which way does it travel? Countryside to city, city to countryside, or city to city? We do know one thing. Pockets of AIDS spring up along the continental truck routes. Anywhere travelers come into contact with locals, like this working-class tavern or shebeen in Malawi.
Lorsque vous allez en brousse, vous faites la prévalence. Vous avez une prévalence de moins de 1%. Ça veut dire que la population de brousse africaine et la vieille population africaine n'a pas été en contact avec ces virus. Et c'est la population des villes qui est en contact avec ces virus-là. Nous pensons donc que le virus du sida a été introduit en Afrique par ce qu'on peut appeler la civilisation ou le mélange des populations.
There is an Africa which the truck routes have not penetrated, the great rainforests of central Zaire. The great myth about AIDS is that it originated here in Central Africa and spread to the rest of the world. The Pygmies, or bush people, are indigenous to the rainforest. There is no AIDS here, in part due to a traditional code which inhibits sexual contact with the outside world. Living in small family groupings, the bush people view the forest as their protector. It gives them food and shelter. But they are not totally isolated from the world beyond the forest. Increasingly, they trade with it for the things the forest does not provide. For some, one form of contact is the regional health clinic. This is Chabi, in the interior of Zaire, one of several health posts built and run by Christian missionaries to serve the local population. Pearl Winterburn is a Plymouth Brethren missionary and a nurse. She has worked in Zaire since 1952. She founded the Chabi Clinic, the hub for 5 regional health posts.
Hapa kuido iko miaka 2 tunaanza kazi ya hapa. Okay, just in case you don't know Swahili, I am Pearl Winterburn from North Bay, Ontario, and this is Edo, one of our health posts in the Turi Forest that we're just now beginning to open. When we first came, malaria, this is back in 52, malaria was killing children by the hundreds. Seldom would a child come in convulsion and return home. But after opening up well baby clinics and starting prophylactic malaria treatment, this has changed greatly so that now malaria is one of our minor problems.
But what about AIDS?
AIDS were unknown to us away from the cities until in the last couple of years. It has come in mostly from the cities or the high populated areas.
Some people say it's endemic in this area.
It's not endemic in this area, never has been, but it has been in the cities for years and years and years. And it's coming to us because of transportation is beginning to open up more, and in that there's a lot more coming to us.
Dr. Samuel Okwari heads the AIDS control program of Uganda.
There has been a lot of conjecture of saying, oh, it came from here, it came from Africa, it came from Europe. I think that is dangerous because it does not actually help us to contain the problem. Even if it came from anywhere, how is it going to help you? How is it really going to help you to contain the problem? As far as we are concerned here in this country, our policy is that if the snake is in the house, you do not have to ask and say, how did it enter into the house? Go straight and hit the snake, then later on you will ask, through which hole did it pass?
The Tasso Clinic in Kampala, Uganda is unique in Africa. A grassroots program, the clinic's doors are open to anyone diagnosed as HIV positive. Here, they are paid to sew blankets. Many have been fired from their previous jobs or are just too weak to work. Family care and counseling are provided, but much more.
The main objective, what we are aiming at, is to reach people, to reach out in kindness and compassion to people who receive the diagnosis of AIDS, and also to try and involve their families.
Why?
There are many single parents at Tasso. The other spouse may have already succumbed to the disease or deserted the ailing partner. Tasso helps them cope by providing nutritious meals for them and their children. There is a 40% chance that the children of mothers with AIDS will be born with the virus or contracted in infancy. In many families, one child will display symptoms, while another may not.
Most members of my family, they are worried because they know I'm going to die. Despite they also don't want to entertain me in their places of residence. Well, the whole story goes back to 1986.
David was a graduate business student at the University of Nairobi. He was granted a fellowship to study in Britain. Shortly thereafter, his ailing wife died of AIDS. He learned that he too had the illness and was forced to abandon his studies. His life was in ruins.
It has affected nearly my whole life because I'm no longer acceptable to my friends. I'm no longer acceptable to work. I can't apply for employment now, so I'm unemployed.
Do you have children?
I've got 3 children.
And how are they?
2 are fine and the youngest is sick. I only hope my parents live longer. If they don't, then I don't know what's going to happen to my children.
My husband fell sick and was diagnosed that he was positive, and after some time he died. So I felt it necessary for me to have a check. I was found positive, and I felt it necessary to work partly as a volunteer to assist people to learn how to live with this HIV problem, because a lot of people were very scared about it. In fact, many of them are still scared. But as far as the organization is concerned, we are trying to help them to drive out the scareness and the fear they have. When they get this news of being positive, some of them want to kill themselves, others go as far as stopping working. When they still have to live, they still need to eat. So it helps when we drive this fear out of those people by counseling them, telling them what it really means. Being positive doesn't mean that tomorrow you will die. No. All it means your immunity is weakened, and if your immunity is weakened, you need to be very careful about your life. You need to eat well. You need to treat yourself very carefully, that if you have fever, you have to say doctor about it.
Often the first reaction when they get a positive test is, I have AIDS, which isn't true at all. I mean, if they're not sick, they may be HIV positive, but not sick. You have a 50% chance of having 10 years of life. So what are you going to do in that 10 years? How are you going to cope? How are you going to manage and plan? And so that is the counseling, informing people about the facts so that they don't fall prey to misconceptions and fears and rumors.
Omusajja gyali naye twayawukana naye kugamba omwana naye gyali balina ekitaavu. Nyambye mu bintu bingi kubanga ebadde mpa eddagala empa ebyokwambala. Bwe najja mulago nabo ne banzijjako omusaayi ne bampa ekitanda nga ndi mulwadde okunsindika abaana ababiri bali bulungi okujjako ayafa.
Does she see her husband?
Well, my personal involvement began with the tragic events which followed the diagnosis of my own husband, who was diagnosed with AIDS in a hospital in England. I wanted so much to see him, but I wasn't quite prepared for what I saw when I got there. He was completely different, very different. I mean, he had been a big man and very full of life, young. He was 38. And what I saw was different, very different. He'd lost almost all his weight. So it was really at that time that I made a secret vow to myself and to God that if I ever went through this problem intact, as it were, I would try and, as much as possible, do something towards this cause, something that would be positive, something that could help other people sort of cope with the emotions and the questions and the anxieties that Chris, my late husband, and I went through during that period. We believe, and this has been very, very strong, that he might have been infected in 1983 when he was involved in a road traffic accident and he was transfused with 8 units of blood. And one of the people who gave him blood was his younger brother, who in 1985 died of what we know now, clearly, must have been AIDS.
Until 1978, there really was quite a good blood bank system in Uganda, but between 1978 and 1988 it got worse and worse for 3 reasons. One, there was war. Another was that people lost confidence in the system. And the third, there was no supplies, electricity failed, water was not obtainable in the blood bank. And so the hospitals throughout the country started their own little blood banks, trying to get blood from the relatives of patients in hospital. If a person needs blood, the doctors see the relatives and say that they need 1, 2, 3 pints of blood urgently, and it's up to the relatives to collect it. Now, the relatives could ask in the family, but often there's nobody in the family who's eligible to give blood or is in the right place at the right time. So they go out to the community and they recruit blood donors, and the donors recruited in this way have 4 to 5 times the seropositive rate of our volunteer donors. What we have to do is to select donors who have less risk of getting the infection, because for the first month or so after infected, there is no test that can pick up the donor who is infected, and they can pass on the disease. So our main effort must be to get donors who understand the risks and say honestly that they have not exposed themselves, and then test very thoroughly. When we started here in this blood bank, we made a policy of doing 2 tests on every donated unit of blood, because in Africa the incidence of HIV is first of all very high, and secondly it is extremely important that we do not transfuse any blood that might be infected. We want the best test. Let's have a look at some results. This was tests done the end of last week. Let's look along the page now. We've got 1 positive, another positive, another positive, another positive, 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 positive. In this refrigerator is our blood that we've processed ready for delivery to the hospitals. You'll see it is typed, type O, this one, and it says HIV negative. And then, of course, what do we do with the blood which is not suitable for use? Well, that's in this refrigerator and will eventually be destroyed. This, you see here, is about 1 week's discards.
Ironically, the onset of this fatal disease is often marked by a variety of minor illnesses, rashes, cold sores, and low-level infections. But the simple medications required to treat these symptoms are extremely expensive in Africa. Tasso relies heavily on foreign donations for its drug supplies.
You take this medicine, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. We have read books that they have tried different types of medicine. If they could give us such types of medicine for us to try also, it would be very grateful for. We would be very grateful for it.
Well, what I would only demand from people from West is send us drugs, to donate drugs to us, so that maybe we can live a little bit longer.
In Africa, AIDS is a family tragedy. Sufferers are shunned and avoided by their kin. Infected parents worry about who will look after their children when they die. Perhaps most painful of all, many new mothers are told their babies have been born with the virus.
Women in Africa, whether they are married or not, are primarily seen as mothers, present or potential mothers. Once you know that a woman is HIV positive, you also know that she has a risk of having a child that will be infected with HIV. So in North America and Europe, one would usually say to the woman, okay, sorry, but it's better you have no children from now on. Within the African setting, that is almost impossible.
We might think to counsel people not to have children because of the risk that the child might be HIV positive. But in Africa, over the past years, there is a risk of children dying anyway. And so people understand the idea that some children might die. Families accept some of those risks. And it may be important for family survival. Therefore, children born who don't turn out to be positive might be very important. So that people may feel that they may want to have children. The important thing, I think, is to give them the facts to work with so they can talk to people and people make their own decisions and take responsibility.
You know, this is a very difficult problem. You see, this is why AIDS really is not a medical problem. It's a deep social and philosophical issue, really. Because how would you really counsel such a woman? Because as far as I'm concerned, if I am the patient, I have a different answer. If I'm the doctor, I have another answer. If I'm the community, the answer may be different. But I think here, as far as we are concerned here, we take the views of the patient as paramount, over and above that of the doctor or even the community, especially if it comes to the question of procreation.
Vous savez, le malade sida coûte très très cher. Il coûte plus cher sur le continent américain que sur le continent africain. Mais même sur le continent africain, ce malade coûte très 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 cher. Une fois j'ai fait le calcul, un malade sida, à partir du premier symptôme jusqu'à sa mort, il coûte environ 77 000 zaïrs. Et je pense que réellement, si on devait prendre ce malade en charge totalement, donc médicalement, psychologiquement, socialement, il coûterait 5 fois plus cher. On n'a pas d'argent.
The indirect effects of the disease are felt here in the marketplaces of Central Africa, the last link in an economic chain which begins in a distant government office. All over Africa, the quality of life will be affected as hard currency is diverted to fight the disease. In countries which spend only $1 per person per year on healthcare, the AIDS crisis is draining away funds which could otherwise have been used for urgent social needs. Thus, the African poor are further impoverished by AIDS. Illness can have catastrophic effects when the average annual income is only $350, and one worker may be supporting as many as 8 family members. Cane workers in Malawi typically earn 45 cents a day and supplement their diet with field mice. AIDS is also decimating the skilled labor force, the technicians and managers. Precisely those in whom Africa has made a substantial educational investment and to whom it looks for its future economic growth.
Most of the people affected are people who could do a lot in all sectors of the economy. Some are doctors, some qualified engineers, some are university lecturers and the like.
Ce sont des hommes qui exercent sur la femme un certain attrait, un certain prestige matériel ou éducationnel. Ce qui fait que parmi les patients sida, il y a des gens qui sont riches. Parce que en ayant pas mal de possibilités financières, ces hommes se sont permis d'avoir 2 femmes, 3 femmes et plusieurs femmes. Et c'est comme ça qu'ils sont arrivés à attraper cette maladie, malheureusement pour eux.
L'épidémie de sida va avoir un impact négatif certain sur les économies des pays en développement, non seulement en développement, même pour les pays développés. Ce qui montre que nous allons dans les très prochaines années avoir des gros problèmes économiques, parce que nous n'avons pas seulement le problème du sida, nous avons d'autres maladies, comme vous l'avez dit tout à l'heure, et nous n'avons pas que d'autres maladies, nous avons aussi des problèmes économiques qui sont évidents. Par exemple, nos produits qui sont très mal vendus à l'extérieur, l'accroissement de la population, ainsi de suite. C'est-à-dire que c'est évident que nous allons, avec les sida, avoir des problèmes économiques très très sérieux.
Children aged 5 to 15 are virtually unaffected by the illness. They escaped infection at birth and are too young to contract it through sexual activity. The hope for an AIDS-free generation depends on giving the necessary information to these children. And that means getting the word out on AIDS without the media penetration that exists in the developed world.
There are no ready channels to do mass health education. People have no TV. In many countries they are too poor to have radios. So one needs to look for alternative channels.
What have I done to deserve this incurable scourge? Even my friends shun me now. I've been to every white man's hospital. They can't cure me. I think I know why. The ancestors must be taking their revenge on me for having neglected them for too long and taking to the white man's ways instead.
Jimmy Katumba is Uganda's pop music superstar. In his 3-hour variety stage show, he devotes 20 minutes to a dramatic account of the life of an AIDS sufferer. The drama's protagonist is infected through reckless sexual activity. Despairing over the inability of Western medical science to cure him, the sufferer turns to traditional medicine, with disappointing results.
It's very educative. If the people could really take their lesson to improve, it would help to show that the disease is finishing us, and they will stop improving their habits.
Now, I think for the first time in Uganda, we have got artists who are really trying to fight the epidemic. And I think their message is so good because they are really telling people to change their ways.
I'm really interested in the drama about AIDS. Why did you produce it?
Well, this is now an international problem. It's not only peculiar to Uganda, not only to East Africa, but the whole world. And we think if we go on dramatizing this kind of thing, people get awakened and they start, well, loving more carefully.
Are you also directing this at children?
The young children? Yeah. Oh yes. Every person right from the age of nursery school, I have a feeling, should learn what AIDS is and how it catches people and how to to avoid it.
So do you think it will really influence people to change their behavior?
Of course. Some of them would, yes. Some of them would. I've interviewed quite a number who have attended our shows, and they have told us, some of them have told us, yes, we think what you're saying is, carries a lot of sense. And others have said, look, Jimmy, it's difficult, it's difficult to stick to one person and this kind of thing.
When somebody is actually going off and so on, we have...
These Ugandan student nurses are being trained to go into the villages and teach people about AIDS. They must overcome misconceptions and superstitions about the virus, which impede the acceptance of effective preventative measures.
So we must understand that witchcraft does not transmit HIV. It has nothing to do with the virus. I don't know, and I think witchcraft has never been successful in anything. Has it ever been?
In this exercise, students are given slips of paper. On each slip is the name of a different activity. The students go to the blackboard and categorize the degree of risk of each activity.
Relations sexuelles avec des partenaires multiples. Je mettrai ceci dans le groupe.
They range from communal swimming to sex with multiple partners.
Parce que c'est dangereux d'avoir beaucoup de partenaires sexuels parce que comme ça on multiplie nos chances d'attraper le sida.
High risk, low risk, no risk, and I don't know. Posters are a cheap, effective way of reaching people. But any campaign must contend with politics. Africa is dominated by authoritarian regimes of all political stripes. Governments strictly control the press through censorship and intimidation. Just talking about AIDS can get you in trouble. In Zaire, our crew was arrested at gunpoint and held for 2 hours. The film was confiscated. The crime? Filming the exterior of a hospital from the street.
No government likes to say that there is a big problem, but we cannot deal with it. And as long as the governments, through WHO or through bilateral agencies, don't see their way to actually get the resources necessary to tackle the epidemic, they won't recognize them that easily, because it's a pure embarrassment. It's one more thing that risks to destabilize the country.
And there is also a killer germ called AIDS. It's scary and it's everywhere. It can get into anyone's body and there is no cure yet. Take Joe for instance. The nasty germ got into his body 4 years ago, and to this day, he is still as frisky as ever.
Joe is beginning to feel sick. He is now suffering from an AIDS disease.
Joe has died of AIDS, and sadly, he has infected both Mary and the baby.
The South African group, Puppets Against AIDS, faces a unique set of problems in getting their message through the walls of apartheid.
We created a show for everybody, not for blacks or whites, for everybody in South Africa. And now what we do is we performed in the streets, in clinics, in the city, in the townships, for every children, adults, anybody. You'll find that certain groups are pointing to, let's say, white saying, no, it's a black disease, or black saying, no, it's a white disease, man, it's, you know, it's not going to touch me, or something like that.
It's obviously very politically linked, and it's a very political problem in South Africa. So what we're doing is working through community groups, community organizations, and so that people can accept us. Because what the government has done is they've really alienated the community, and whatever they're doing now is not being taken seriously. People think it's just another government plot to manipulate them.
And therefore you don't get people to go forward and challenge the disease. Like, for instance, condoms. People thought that it was one of the government methods to stop them from having more large families and things like that. You know, because a condom has been associated with, has been looked at by black people as a government tool to stop blacks to increase, you see. So it's been a problem as well, even for us to say use a condom.
Place it on the tip of the erect penis. Press the bubble at the end to allow all the air to
In one
escape.
African country, the Minister of Health told me that he felt that condom use had declined as a result of the rumor that had been spread that condoms, which are imported from outside, had been contaminated themselves with HIV.
The degree of acceptance of condoms varies from country to country. In Zaire, a plastic model is used for demonstrations conducted on the streets for the benefit of healthcare workers and passers-by. In other countries, the situation is quite different.
First of all, condoms are a foreign culture in this country. And when some people are using it, sometimes here the women complain. They feel that they're eating a sweet in a wrapper. That type of analogy. Point number 2 is availability of condoms. Last year we got about 2 million condoms. Now, you know very well that we are about 5 million Ugandans here in this country. If we swung into action, these adults swung into action, even for one night, even for once or twice, 1 or 2 rounds, you can actually see that there will not be enough condoms.
Il faut qu'on arrive à diminuer le portage du virus. Ce qui suppose qu'il faut qu'on oblige, qu'on arrive à faire accepter le condom, qui est le seul truc préventif actuellement. Mais il faut qu'on arrive à faire accepter ça à beaucoup de monde en activité sexuelle. Nous avons reçu des condoms de l'USAID, 3,5 millions de condoms que nous distribuons gratuitement à la population ivoirienne. On distribue en ville, on distribue aux étudiants, aux travailleurs et aux prostituées. Nous avons aussi parlé des condoms, nous avons donné des condoms gratuitement, tout en disant quand même que nous ne pourrons pas donner tous les jours gratuitement et qu'il faudra à l'avenir aller acheter les condoms.
Et s'il ne veut pas utiliser un condom?
Si quelqu'un client dit qu'il ne veut pas capote, il dit non, parce que moi j'ai peur de sida. Si tu fais l'amour avec moi sans capote, tu ne fais pas.
There is a sheer problem of poverty, abject poverty really in the rural areas. A farmer is with his hoe, he's barefooted, he's got a torn trouser. If he has a torn trouser, it's most likely that even his condom is torn.
It is quite clear that unless one finds a way of making condoms economically and physically available, there's no way that what exists in theory as a technical means and can in fact be applied in North America or in Europe can straightforwardly be applied in the African situation. It comes down to the irony that it's almost like if we would say for the elite and the middle class one can use condoms and for the poor one can only advise chastity.
Christianity is a significant force in Africa. Uganda has a large Catholic population. The church reaches deep into both urban and rural areas. It uses that reach to provide AIDS educational programs. While the church's position on birth control is well known, it has been notably silent on the use of condoms to prevent the spread of disease.
The church still insists on teaching people to change their lives from within. If you are changing your life, there's be no use of condoms will be of no use because you know that you have to live a good life, and if you want to be married, then you have to select your partner in the right way and live a good life. In that way, these condoms will be of no use.
We recognize the family here in Tasso as a very fundamental unit where care of the person who is infected. The family first and then the community. And we hope to impress upon the communities where these people come from that it's necessary for this person to be cared for. And if this person is cared for, that is one strategy, one approach to prevention of spread of this illness. Because we believe that if people knew that there were facilities to help them, then people might feel that rather than hide away from the fact, they could meet the challenge.
I'd like to tell the people in the West not to be very scared about this because it's a worldwide problem, but to try and struggle to find a cure for it, and to be sympathetic to the people who have been proved HIV positive.